Hello, everyone, and welcome to another American Scouser podcast. I am your host, Timuchin, as always, and with us is our usual crew with the now infamous jersey and the lucky jersey everybody should own. Gally is with us. Gally, what's happening, man?
It's a great week, guys. Nothing better than drubbing United and maybe making a classless person like Simeone look even more classless midweek. You just can't get much better than that. And wait, can you mention drubbing United?
What a freaking week, man. I mean, it's never thought we'd be last week, this time, never thought we'd be talking about this. Even someone like Bickler cannot probably find something wrong with this week. Right, Bickler? What's happening?
I'm honestly just here for the trivia.
And, well, there we go. Right away, we'll jump with the trivia. A lot to talk about, obviously, with, yesterday's game. And somehow, within the last 24 hours, I think I managed to watch that thing another couple of times. Not to mention, like, countless videos and everything like that. Just, and we'll talk about that. Because, that game means a lot more to me than anything else. And have I been having fun with my brother? Okay, so let's start with the trivia, as always, because that's the best part for Bickler. And this week's trivia is going to go with yesterday's game. So a bazillion records that he broke, by the way, Salah yesterday, and as a team we did as well. But he was the first Liverpool player to score a hat-trick, actually, over there. So now the question is, there are only two players who scored actually a hat trick in the Premier League against United. Can you guys tell me who the other player is? And as a bonus tiebreaker, when it was? Obviously, we're going to start with you, Victor. I don't even know why you're waiting to see who we're going to start with. Obviously, we're starting with you. I like how you guys are silence.
You guys are such dicks. All right, so you said two players?
Yes. So after Salah, there's one other player who has scored a hat trick against United in the Premier League. Who is the player? And there's do it as the tiebreaker. So already some good guesses coming in, but let's see if the answer is there.
There's some good ones. Oh God, I'll go Van Persie, 2007.
Van Persie? No, it has to be a Liverpool player, bro.
Oh, I thought you said other. Okay, all right. I thought you said Premier League player that wasn't.
No. Liverpool player scoring a hat trick in the Premier League against United, aside from Salah yesterday.
Well, I actually know this one. I think it is. It's Dirt Count, right?
I know, man. I'm asking you.
No, I think it is. I'm trying to think of the year though. It would have been 2000.
That was my guess.
No, I think it's 2000. Oh man, I don't think it was 7. It was after that. 2009. I'll guess. I don't know. 2009-ish.
He says 2009-ish. He throws in there at the end the ish. Yep. What do you have, Galdi? What ish do you have?
I'm gonna say it was in the it was 2008-09 season. I don't know if it was the first half of the year or second half, but I think it was 2008. But it was Dirk Kuyt that had the other hat trick.
It was Dirk indeed. I don't even know if I want to count this because we had many of our listeners already give you guys the answer. And the year was 2011. March 2011 was the other hat trick scored against United. So I told you guys this would be close. David Cosgrove says he actually was there. And he says he ripped his jeans, which, when it's Cosgrove involved, it's a very believable story. I would believe that and run with that. So that was this week's trivia. And I told you guys would get it. But then when I do that, it's patronizing or whatever. So I'm going to have to find something tougher next week. So let's talk about this week. Normally, we go with kind of like in a order with time in terms of which game was first and stuff. And I do want to get to the Atletico Madrid game and talk about that. Maybe we should not say Madrid a lot of times on the podcast because Real Madrid on Facebook got offended by our podcast last week when we were not even talking about them, but whatever. But because of the game yesterday, the scope of it, how it went down, and probably the implications that are going to come with it now, let's start with yesterday's game. holy shit is all I could say. I've never expected that. I mean, you guys know me. I worry as a lifestyle. And after, I saw the lineup, my regular amount of worry doubled. And I know, there was a lot of talk during the week in terms of, we should be crushing them. We're a lot better team, and we were in better form, and they are in shambles. They kind of been doing all kinds of the stuff. But when these two teams, especially Old Trafford, even when we ran away with the title, it was like a struggle at Old Trafford. So I was already worried. Seeing the lineup made me even more worried. So let's start with that, because that's probably the biggest talking point. At least it was in our Discord chat, the fan chat, that if you have not joined, by the way, please do, because we had definitely a lot of fun this week. But so Bigler, let's start with you. We see this lineup come out. Fabinho has a late knock, and that's obviously affects the entire midfield, but we were kind of short. And I guess the biggest let me get your take first, and then I want to ask you guys some like specifics as well. What do you say, or what did you say when you saw the lineup?
I mean, my first thought was Klopp either really loves Konate or he really hates him. I mean, because that's a hell of a spot start there. I mean, and to me, like, my gut reaction to this was, I think this is like, I mean, I'm probably reading way too much into this, but my gut reaction was, this is what you do when you believe a player is the future. You pick a big spot for him and see if he's capable of the moment. And if he is, that way you can neatly shuffle him in, and that's your future. And you can, I like not to say they're closing the door on Matip, because I think Matip's been our best defender all year. But I mean, to me, you only do that if you very strongly believe that this guy's your future.
That was kind of like no Matip was kind of a shock. And I know he did not have a great game against like midweek. And we've kind of talked about playing him way too many times can be painful to everybody involved in the long run. So I could see why he wouldn't be there, but Gally, shocked to see not Gomez probably, like, for example, be there. I know we perhaps did not want Ronaldo picking on Gomez, whereas, Konate not only has the speed, but has the size as well.
Was Nico on the bench yesterday? I can't even remember. I didn't look at the graphic you had up there really close. If you look there, Nico's not available. So I can understand keeping Gomez on the bench, because he's really your cover for Trent should something happen and you need to sub him off for an injury. Clearly Milner will get to playing a 35-year-old 3 times in a week and then being surprised he can't make it 60 minutes. And with Gomez not being back to full fitness, and I do think that when we've seen him, he's looked tentative. And I think part of the reason that Konate was in that match last night or yesterday afternoon was so that on the set plays, should the game be close, on set plays, Virgil did not have to man mark Ronaldo, because Virgil has been beaten a few times. If there's one thing that I've seen, it's his quickness. Like it's not his overall speed, but sometimes his initial quickness of making cuts and moves, it's still getting back to his full form. And I think having Konate there was to absolutely bully Ronaldo. And he did it. He threw him to the ground early in the match, and Anthony Taylor gave him a nice, get up wave. There's that great scene later when we get to Ronaldo's petulant acts at the half, where Konate walks into that group and the entire scrum looks like they're all about like 3.5 feet shorter. And they just kind of look like they're like, it was like a fight amongst the 6-year-old kids in a soccer match where 11 people buzz around the pitch together. And then the coach walked over and just separated everybody. And he's just an absolute mountain of a man. And on top of that, he has touch and class. I mean, he had that through ball that almost set Mo in early on in the first half. And I was like, wow, if he's going to be able to make plays like that as he gets more and more comfortable, we all said we bought one for the future, but he might be a big part of our present as well. And I'm with Paul. I think this was a moment to set up that this is his job to earn by the second half of the season. And I expect him to do it.
Yeah, that was, I mean, obviously it was like a risky call because just did not know. I was more worried about, I mean, David Cosgrove says, for example, with his pace, obviously it kind of like enables us to play that high line a lot better. But Gomez has the pace too. And I thought, I was more worried that he would be tentative and sometimes like mess up the line and stuff like that because of that. And I was, I mean, extremely impressed with obviously how he played. And I guess how crappy United was kind of like helps the cause. But so let's look at the midfield next, and then we'll kind of like talk about the long-term implications for our, I guess, squad, especially when it comes to Konrad and stuff. But so obviously Fabinho not being there makes the midfield shuffle. So what is your gut feeling, Bickler? If Fab is not there, who out of the three would not normally start? You think Milner or Keita gets the cut? Because Keita, which we will go back to afterwards, we still don't know like exactly how injured he is. But when we talked about the Atletico Madrid game, we're gonna go back to Keita as well. So what is your gut feeling on that? Who would have, you think, taken the cut to make room for Fab?
Well, I'd like to think it was Milner, considering the fact that you just genuinely don't want to play him 3 days and 8 games. And I know we've been playing him a lot, but I think at his age, I'm using as a fullback cover on the bench, or even late mid cover. Also don't love what Henderson and Milner generally do to each other in the midfield. They seem to negate each other's games.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, they certainly didn't do that on the night. So yeah, that's who it would be for me.
What do you think, Gally?
I would say I think I was saying it in our Discord chat midweek when Keita got subbed off and everyone was talking about it, and then Klopp made all the comments, and we'll get to that about the Atletico match. But I made some comments that I thought part of the tactical reason to take him off might have been that he was intending on starting him right away and didn't want to try to play Keita twice in 5 days, 90-minute matches because of his injury record. I think Keita was going to start that match because I think Jurgen Klopp wanted to set up with his best pressing and attacking front and midfield, and that includes Keita and that includes Bobby Firmino, and those are the two reasons. And I think it also includes Jota now, and I think that's why we saw the three of them. We'll get to the front three, but I think Milner would have been on the bench, and who knows if Milner's on the bench, maybe then Gomez is starting at center back. We'll never know. But I guess we don't have to question it because we went out to Old Trafford, and you could argue we were light 4 or 5 of our best 11 that we believe were our starting 11 on opening day this year, and we wiped the floor with them. And to Cosgrove's point, they really did show their true colors yesterday. They were absolute frauds, stealing a paycheck, and absolutely, whether they mean to or not, they're trying to get their manager sacked, which is the absolute worst thing that could happen to us as supporters.
I know, reading all this news, I was like, shit, man, maybe we should have stopped at 3 or something because really you don't want this guy gone. Because if you look at the squad, I mean, if they look at their lineup, I mean, look at their bench, they got like all that money spent sitting on the bench. And then they're still starting McTominay and Fred, which I know drives United fans crazy. But I mean, before we, I guess, dissect them, I know Darren O'Connor, one of our listeners, and he's actually has a great podcast himself with ATX, and his point of them not pressing properly, that has to be a coaching thing, right? I mean, obviously, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lot of practice and it's a lot of like analysis that makes you, what triggers it and all that kind of stuff. A lot goes into pressing. It's not just running more, as like, some people like newer to the sport might think. So, I mean, do we blame the players for this fiasco or the coaching? I mean, we're enjoying it either freaking way, Paul, but I mean, is it a concern that if somebody with a brain or some tactical knowledge comes in charge, I mean, United can get some resurgence with this squad?
Listen, no matter how bad you want to claim United is as a team, in terms of just quality, the quality shouldn't ever be beaten 5-0 by us, in my opinion. That's not to say we're not better than them. It's just 5-0. There's just fundamental breakdowns. I think the blame lays on both parties. I think the players didn't play great. I think there's a huge blame that's got to go on Ole. You mentioned it. Huge money on the bench. Players that you went out and bought, right? So you would assume that if you go out and buy these players, you know what you're supposed to do with them. This team has been handcuffed by Pogba for years, trying to pigeonhole him into a 4-2-3-1. Like, there's been no flexibility on formation from United's side. And you look at this team, and you've got a team that plays fairly well. I mean, really, their bread and butter is counterattack. Like, that's what they're best at doing. And you're playing a Liverpool side. If they have an Achilles heel, it's being countered. And what do? You go and try to beat them with a high press. And that just blows my mind. Like, I don't know where, like, in what meeting room, on what whiteboard you were looking at this game and thought, let's take what we do best and shelve it for another tactic when what you do best is the only thing that beats you. Like, that's the only thing that would have beaten us. So, and the weird thing is they put out the players to beat us by counter. Like, that is the side that you put out if you want to beat us by counter pressing. Like, those are the players that you use. You use sheer pace. And, like, it just doesn't make any sense, man. You plugged Rashford in, who's cold, who hasn't played in forever. You bench Pogba. So you got a pissed off Pogba, and then you decide at 4-0 this is the appropriate time to sub him in. And, of course, he makes a boneheaded move. He's already pissed off. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, from a management standpoint, it's a fail from top to bottom. And it's amazing getting online today and seeing the amount of support from the United side of people that still want him in that position. It's wild.
I think that comes with hiring like an ex-player, because fans have a tough time distinguishing the dude as a coach and the dude as a player, and don't want to really go at him like they did with Mourinho and stuff like that, who obviously is a better coach than Ole. I mean, obviously his United experiment was a disaster as well, but because of what the guy did as a player, I think it kind of like it becomes a bit delusional, or the person gets a lot more chances than they should. Normally, I think any other coach in there that wasn't an ex-player would get the entire blame, but I see it fired all over the place to the players and stuff like that. And to, David Jennings' point, obviously they have like a lot bigger issues from the top, all the way to the bottom with some of the signings. I mean, Ronaldo, they pretty much signed so that he wouldn't go to City and things like that. But I think along with that, it just creates a lot of problems within the club, because you can kind of tell that team on the field does not have a true leader. And I think, Bickler, when you did your ratings, you were asking about what our favorite moment was. And that fight in the 45th minute when he was freaking like kicking Curtis Jones on the ground, the reaction to that was probably my favorite part, where almost the entire team of Liverpool was there. And there were only like 2-3 Manchester United players. And I think that, to me, just shows the difference between where the two clubs are right now, where you have a team on one side and you have a bunch of really good players on the other side. And if they suddenly click and do something crazy, like magical, they win, they come back, they do all these things. But overall, it's just not a team. Gally, what is your take in terms of, maybe you enjoyed this a lot longer, mind you, but what is your take in there, the reasons behind?
I agreed with what Jennings and Cosgrove were saying, actually. Our two Davids are on fire today in our comment section, helping spin this out for us. At the same time, there's no way, any way in hell, anyone at United truly believed the re-signing of Cristiano Ronaldo was good for the long-term standing of the club and or its players and Ole as manager. Yet they did it anyways, because they're not actually worried about a club. They're worried about a business model. And it is fair to say, it's why sometimes the folks that kill FSG do it too, but the Glazers have a bottom line that is about making money. And as long as they're getting in top four, which Ole's done since he's been there, they're accomplishing goal number one every year. Now, the diehard Man United fan, they don't want to hear that. I don't believe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wants to hear top four is acceptable. And I think he said the right things. He's not tactically equipped to do the job. That's their fault for hiring him. Mismanagement. Signing of players. Mismanagement. You spend $90 million after 2 years to get Jadon Sancho, and he can't get off the bench for Liverpool for your biggest match. He was the missing piece. That's all we heard for years. He was what they needed. Him, Rashford, and Greenwood would be the future. What do? They start Ronaldo in every match. They play Ronaldo for 90 minutes with 10 men when he's giving you no effort. which ultimately means they were carrying 3 passengers with only 10 men on the field. You had Cavani, you have Cavani and you have Ronaldo out there at the same time doing nothing past the halfway mark, and you're playing with 10 guys. It's just ludicrous. If there was ever a moment for another midfielder or to give Donny van de Beek some time, right? If there was ever a time to utilize your squad, it would have been yesterday. And instead, he was like, no, we're going to try to find a way to get 1 goal in this match. Rather than lose 5-0, I'd rather lose 6-1. I'll put on Cavani, a poacher. You know, they have no effort. They have no reason. And they went away from everything they were building. And I could not be happier about it.
Yeah, I mean, regular listeners of the podcast know, I have a brother who's a United fan. And, I loved how he was playing really coy, by the way, like during the day when we found the game live. Fenerbahce happened to be playing at the same time. They actually kicked off like half an hour afterwards. And so I'm messaging, I'm like, oh, Mo Salah and stuff like that. He's like, oh, what is it? Is it still 2-0? I'm like, dude, get the hell out of here. Like, you don't know the freaking score, not getting notifications nonstop about what's going on. So, I mean, it was like, I know, actually, I think David Scouser himself made a post in our, Facebook group in LFC America about, how overall, maybe for the people of the city, the Everton game might be bigger. But in terms of rivalries, I would say for most, at least, Liverpool fans, I think this is the bigger game. I know for me it is automatically just because I'm a jackass brother who roots for United. And it's a lot of bragging rights and a lot of months of trash talking. But I never expected this game to be. I mean, I knew we were the better team. The game being at Old Trafford kind of concerned me because we did not really play well there normally, and just because of the rivalry, kind of the form, I knew they. Well, actually, I thought they'd be up for this game and stuff like that. But I mean, shit, this was not only as comfortable as the Watford game, 10 times more fun to watch than the Watford game, just because, I mean, seeing Alex Ferguson's face, then scanning onto Dalglish, which, is just a freaking genius shots, that 15 seconds of golden TV right there. It was just amazing. But Bickler, I mean, do you kind of take this as, because Klopp really downplayed it as well to his credits. Was it really a great Liverpool, a shitty United, or kind of a little bit of a combination?
I'm sure it's a little bit of both. I mean, that's just generally the way sports work in general. When there's a huge blowout between two sides, that's at the pro level, that's generally the case. But I mean, I think the emphasis can be on how great Liverpool were, for sure. I mean, from an attacking standpoint, I think Mo Salah's I wrote about this a little bit. I think that Mo Salah's at a level that I haven't seen since Suarez, where players around him are just better by sheer proximity. He's straight up raising the level of everybody around him, which I think is a pretty rare thing to see at that level. He's unplayable right now. Everybody knows he's turning onto his left and he can still do it. And if he can still turn it on his right and tuck it in from an impossible angle. And that's even if you get in front of him. That's not to include the long balls that are getting pinged over the top to him. The movement across the board I thought was incredibly sharp. And, man, let's give it to Naby. Naby was incredible yesterday in terms of just, on the break. I think what his kind of tripped me up with Naby is, I'm a believer that he's a quality player and that he's a good player. I don't believe he's trash. I don't believe he's a bum. I don't believe, we swung and missed on him. I do believe it took some adjustment in terms of the physicality of the league. I do think, and this is the one thing I will say about him, I think when we purchased him, we thought we were getting the next Conte, and I think we got a little more Coutinho than we bargained for. And the fact that he sometimes struggles on one-on-one defending, and don't give me the fucking tackle numbers for the year. I know that he leads the team in tackles, but I'm talking, if you're actually watching him, he struggles in one-on-one defending. He's really, really good going forward. He has the killer turnover in really bad places on the pitch. He'll turn it over. He'll cough it up in really bad spots. But he also will intercept the ball in really critical areas and start the counter. And that's what he did versus United. He was winning everything in really, really key spots. And his movement was incredible. And generally, I think he plays better on the left. But, I mean, he was just on fire on the right. So here's to hoping he's okay, and we see more of that. I think we have to give ourselves a little credit. We were incredible.
So I'm gonna get to Keita, but let me come to you with the same question, Gally. Like in terms of, do you think it was us or them or a combination? Then I want to kind of go into the Keita conversation because I mean I have been, you guys know, kind of like probably the most critical out of us three of Keita and what he does, and I think we have something that I mean it's funny that you brought up the name Coutinho because that's what I was like gonna like mention. But before we get to that Keita conversation, because that will kind of lead us into the Atletico Madrid too. What is your overall like feeling in terms of what caused this beauty, Gally?
Well, I think that it was a mixture. I would say that was a really good performance, and we shouldn't be critical of Liverpool because United were dogs and we took advantage. We are an amazing team of attacking players who, when playing in unison, can look like poetry in motion. And it looked like that yesterday. And a lot of that was due to, well, the fact that Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire play on the left side of United's defense. But it was also because our players were prepared, set up, had a game plan, and executed it. And I think that gets overlooked when a team puts in a stinker like United did yesterday. Tottenham put in a stinker similar to United if you watch their match against West Ham. But West Ham was not clinical. West Ham did not have world-class players buzzing all over the pitch. And in a rivalry game playing at home, they were able to squeak out a goal and they won 1-0, a great win in a London derby. But you don't go to United and win 5-0 just because United were bad. You do that because you played your brand of football and did it right. And I think Klopp got everything right from his starting lineup to his tactics. You know, he was forced into 2 substitutions because of the injuries. As far as Keita goes, you know, we disagree, Timuchin, as far as his overall value. I don't think he was as nearly as open in possession yesterday. I think you mentioned 2-3 times. I saw one, and he raised his hand right away. You were right. Rashford got in and placed one over the bar. To Paul's point, he'll often turn the ball over. It does appear to be in the wrong place. I think to Paul's point earlier, one of the reasons he looked really good playing on the right that he did yesterday is Mo Salah is at a point now where he is just helping everyone. I mean, there were a couple pieces of exchanges between the movement between Mo, Keita, Hendo, Trent, Bobby down that wing that was just beautiful and special. Led to one of, I think, the second goal, the Jota goal, where Trent whips the ball across and Jota taps it in. So I just really feel that we saw a lot of great performances yesterday. Naby being, you know, I made the joke in our Discord channel that Mo's on another planet right now, and it's a good thing because it allowed Naby to be the best player on earth for the first half yesterday. Because I don't think anybody is getting a shot at being the number one player on the planet, number one player in the league. You know, the league will still find a way to give somebody else the player of the month. But what Mo's doing right now, I think it's 15 goals and 5 assists, which leads the club in both factors. To create 20 goals in our first 13 games that we've not lost any of is pretty amazing. And scoring against all the big clubs.
I think, I mean, it has come to a spot where you can almost sense the concern anytime Mo gets the ball. Like you can kind of sense the concern of the defender anytime he gets the ball, and that obviously affects everything else. Everybody's like, what is he going to do now? And half the time he does what he does, and the other half the time has been very good at distributing the ball and creating for others, which, you know, he did several times yesterday, like creating chances as well. I mean, the thing with Keita is, so let's talk about Keita. I feel like he is totally different than any of the other midfielders we've had over the last 2-3 seasons. And that's why, you know, when you say Coutinho, I think it's the closest thing we've gotten to Coutinho that everybody feels like, you know, everybody has been talking about every freaking offseason. We need a playmaker and stuff like that. Like, you know, we're getting a point guard. But my only concern with him is I think, you know, defensively, and, you know, when we talk about the Atletico Madrid game, and I know, kind of like Bickler says, I don't look at those. I mean, I understand those numbers in terms of tackles, but I think his style of play is a very high risk, high reward kind of a style. So when he's counter pressing yesterday, he wins those balls, and he has done this whenever he's healthy, and he creates and it's immediate goals usually because now we've kind of like, gotten our numbers up there, and obviously our numbers include, Mo, Mane, and Bobby and stuff like that. But when he does that on our ends defensively, he becomes a liability. And he did, like, I watched this game like 3 times now, like I said. One of them is one eye as I was working, but he did that, like I said, in 2-3 different occasions yesterday. Well, he'll take the ball at midfield, and maybe because we're used to it, or I'm used to it after watching this team like night and day for these like last few years, especially with, Handel, Milner, Genie. Trent is open on the right-hand side, and you would kind of like expect the ball to go there. Whereas he will actually take somebody on. He took somebody on twice in our half of the field. One of them was on the circle. One of them was right behind the circle and lost the ball. And that obviously it's the same thing as him winning the ball, going over there instead of playing that simple pass. And the issue with that is because of how we play, when he does that and he loses the ball, Trent, who would normally get that ball, is past midfield now because he's expecting the ball to come there. And it does not, because he kind of like tries to take somebody on and create something. And I think that's part of like probably my concern with him. And I think that's mostly on Klopp and, for us to figure out, or him to learn more when to take those risks and when not to, when to play maybe it's a bit more boring to him, but do the Milner play, if you will, and, like play the easy pass as opposed to try to take somebody on. What's your take on that, Bickler? I mean, because I agree with you in terms of like the numbers. I know he wins a lot of tackles, but then we did see the defending in the Atletico Madrid game, which we'll get to next. And I know there were, especially the second goal. Was that the second goal that, he did weave through like a bunch of people, but still that's almost causes. When we talk about United, for example, and when we say in our first goal, McTominay just steps up like an idiot, and everything kind of like goes from there. It's like pass, pass, pass. Nobody's close to the ball. Salah, Keita, we score. And I feel like it's the same thing. That missed tackle in midfield makes everybody shift, and that causes the goal. And obviously in the first goal, he kind of like, that's kind of like like a schoolboy play to let that guy take the line when you're like covering the short corner and stuff. But Bickler, what is your take on it? Because I know we do not see eye to eye mostly with Gally, so I'm going to come to Gally as well so he can counter my stuff. But what do you have, Bickler?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we kind of I think we see Naby the same way. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, we're used to a midfield that really works short triangular passing in quick succession when it hits big switches, right? If they need to sort of rotate and fluctuate and sort of refresh that offense, that's what happens. And Naby's a different cat. Like, he gets it and he says, screw the triangle, I'm going to drive through it. And I think that's a really good midfielder to have when we play teams that stack 8 in the box against us. When we see teams that play a low block defense, I think that's what you need, because you need somebody to go in and pull that block out of position, because one player breaks that bank, those 2 channels, and then you've got options. Where instead, like previously our option has been, we're just going to have Trent just endlessly pump balls into the box and hope something falls. And that's not, we've seen how productive that isn't. So I think Naby he's a good option to have in that regard. I still believe he can develop. I still believe that he can add to his game and become better defensively in terms specifically of his positioning. But you're right. I mean, he's a riverboat gambler. Like he goes into high risk challenges where if he doesn't come out and win the duel, you're in a really, really bad spot. And on the flip side of that, it looks really good when he wins it. I think back to last year versus Crystal Palace, like we scored a really early goal basically because he just gambled and won one in the channel and just fed it over, and we were up 1-0. So, I mean, you take the good and the bad with Naby, right? I think the truth with him lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's a world beater that just hasn't found form through injury. I don't think he's garbage. I think he's in the middle there. And I still do think, I don't think, Cosgrove asked earlier in the chat channel, do you take the 25 million pounds for Naby next summer, or do you hang on to him, right? Like for me, I don't think it's an either or. And I think our ownership has proven over the course of time that if we see somebody who we believe is good enough for the starting 11, we'd rather run the contract down than sell them at a reduced price. 25 is still a good grip. I get that. I think, if we see an additional midfielder come in, I think we could see a different type of midfielder and then have more flexibility. I have been banging on about this, but I'm a firm believer in Yuri Tillemans. If that happened, I still think you've got some really good flexibility in there, and you have some bit pieces, like you have some more directional pieces that carry the ball more, like Chamberlain, like Ox can do that, and Jota can do that if you move him back a little bit. So I think it allows for a little bit of flexibility. But for the most part, I agree with your kind of assessment of how he plays.
Megan makes a really good point in the chat channel in terms of like how he worked very well with Bobby. I think we do lack that in our midfield sometimes. We kind of expect Mo and Mane sometimes to fill that empty area behind, and obviously they get a lot of their goals that way by playing central, coming from the wings. But yeah, they did make a good deal where Keita likes making those runs to go forward and take advantage of that. But I think, like I say, the high risk, high reward thing, that kind of goes back to we have a player on our hands. Barring, we solving the injury issues, and then, hopefully this one is not as bad. I think if he keeps playing and kind of like gets used to the system and we kind of get used to him, I agree with Paul. I think we stick with what we know rather than, cut our losses short and then, like roll the dice, because it takes a long time, especially in this midfield, Gally, for somebody to kind of learn the system and have Klopp's confidence and trust.
And that's it. Now, listen, Naby makes mistakes, and he is a gambler, and I'm not disputing that. What I question is why are Naby's gambles and mistakes, right? Why is his gambles that turned into mistakes talked about over and over and over and dwelled on, yet 1 out of every 4 times Curtis Jones touches the ball, he takes one too many touches.
Because of what we paid for him?
He turns the ball over all over the pitch. He is an aggressive player, but all we talk about is that he's this driving factor, and he's a guy who shoots from outside the box. And I hate to say it, what it sounds like is he's a fun, goofy-looking Liverpool kid, and we want to root for the Liverpool kid, but the $60 million guy who got given number 8 and hasn't been able to stay healthy is the problem. Thiago turned the ball over for the entire first half of last season in bad places all over the pitch, picked up a yellow card, and gave us crazy eyes every time he did it, right? But we didn't talk about that at all. But we talk about Naby not staying fit. Thiago's been out more minutes and more days than he's been healthy in his LFC career.
I think it goes back to what Bickler is saying, though. I think the price tag and the expectation is a big part of that.
But that's on fans. I'm sorry. That's where I look at it and say that Klopp doesn't care about the price tag, because Klopp Klopp decided he would play Harvey Elliott over a 19-year-old kid with no experience over every other certified midfielder he had, because he felt he earned the job. And he did it with Jones last year. And then when Jones kind of got a little too big for his britches and started turning the ball over, getting a little bit in, trying to turns on the sidelines in tight games, and started turning the ball over and causing goals, he found himself not even on the match day squad, on the bench. And at the beginning of this season, he found himself out of it completely. Because I think that's that learning lesson. And I think that Naby has put in the work to earn more minutes. And I think Jurgen Klopp's man management of starting him in this game is what makes him the best manager in the Premier League, followed probably closely by Pep. And what Pep is doing right now to Sterling, by basically not even putting him in the match day squad, you want your agent to talk about you not being happy? You won't play for this club until you make it right. You're not, he had 2 youth players on the bench yesterday and a fit Sterling sitting in the crowd. And I think that's something Klopp would do. That's something that we would do. And I think what he did yesterday with Keita was brilliant. It's too bad he got hurt, because I think if he finishes that 90 minutes and feels good about himself, we keep building on, what has been happening, which is more consistent play. And to Paul's point, learning when to press and when not to. And I think that's what a run of matches with the top 11 would actually do for him. And he's just never been able to get that. And that's on him. He's got to stay fit. But selling him doesn't make sense to me. You waited too
No,
long.
I don't think so either. I think, like Megan says, it is a tough midfield to play in, and it is a lot of responsibility and not a lot of glory, and he is not that kind of player. So it's kind of like an adjustment on our end where we've had over the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 seasons, the famous boring midfields. We have midfielders who are, the blue collar, if you will. We're going to run around, win the ball, and then feed the guys up front. And I think Keita is not exactly that kind of player. It's just getting the most out of him. But I agree with Bickler. I think the price tag is a big reason for that. Like a lot of the criticism and the expectations. Not only the price tag, but we waited so long for this guy. And I think all that time we watched him, he was, the Bundesliga player of the year. Like, you're just like, oh, they're getting this amazing guy. And then, we really has never – and it could be unfair, like you're saying, Gally. Maybe the expectation was too high. I don't think it's unfair to have that expectation because of the price tag, but I do agree in the fact that maybe did we set it too high, Paul?
Yeah, we probably did, but I don't know how we couldn't. When a player wins Bundesliga Player of the Year and we pay that kind of money and we have to wait that long, I don't know how you don't. And honestly, I think maybe even if you look at his injuries, if like they were contact injuries, I think we might even feel differently now. I think it's the type and manner of the injuries, the stubbing of the toe on the grass, the soft tissue injuries. I think those are ones that like really kind of get the fans, because then you're like, well, dude, is he like a lemon? Is he just broken? Is he not durable enough? Like, it's and then you start getting a little bit of buyer's remorse. So I think it's a combination of like our expectations and just the reality of what happens when a player goes through a lot of non-contact injuries.
Isn't that exactly what we saw with Thiago, though, and exactly what we've seen
for sure, but
in the past?
For sure, but Thiago was big. I think that with Thiago, I think we saw him as a luxury ad. I think he was brought in as like a plan B. Like, this is what we're going to do when people stack the box against us. We got this guy, right? At least that was my expectation. And I know a lot of people had similar expectations. We also were very aware of his injury history. It was discussed at length. So was Konate's. So I think we had tempered and adjusted expectations with Thiago coming in. And then we saw him in training take the ball in midair, and then we all adjusted our expectations unreasonably.
It is true.
I think that's a good point. We did see him as the cherry on top to an already, like a ridiculous team. So it was just like, if you don't have the cherry, we don't have the cherry kind of deal. But you're right. He did get. We talked about it a lot, about all the yellow cards and all the set pieces he gifted opponents, and his infamous shocked look after every foul and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's kind of like the expectations and knowing what we're getting. Whereas, like I say, he was kind of like the cherry on top. So let's go back to the Madrid game. And because I kind of like wanted to the conversation. Obviously, it's a huge win away. And going back to what you were saying in the very beginning of the podcast, yet another not another classless manager. Ole, to be fair, he's kind of like the gentlemanish kind of dude. It was more like his players that were kind of being the jerks. But what do you say about the Madrid game, Gally?
Yeah, so great win. Obviously, it's great coming out gangbusters. I still haven't figured out how Mo got credit for that first goal, but I think that just shows when you're on a planet like him, he has hit the levels of Ronaldo and Messi, because they basically bend the rules to give Messi more goals. I'm pretty sure they added 5 more Barcelona goals in his career just this month while he's been in France. And I don't know how the dubious goals committee in Europe was like, let's just give that to Mo Salah, even though he celebrated with Milner after Milner tapped it. But they said it went off the defender and it was on net. So great for Mo. Great to bag an early brace there. Keita's wonder strike was awesome. Once again, he almost looked like, I don't even want to celebrate because you people don't even believe I should be on the pitch, let alone doing this. I liked what Klopp said after the match, that he had to make the change and bring in Fabinho. He knew there needed to be a change, and it had more to do with the tactics of who was on the pitch than it was taking Naby off. Someone had to come off. It's not always the guy who comes off who's causing the problems. And that, for me, was him both building him up and almost preparing, in my mind, that he was probably going to get that start at United on Sunday, knowing they were still going to have a depleted squad. So I thought the man management was great. If I was Naby, I would ask to never go to Madrid again, seeing that he couldn't make 45 minutes at Real Madrid last year, and he just got over the 45-minute mark at Atletico this year. Sat on the bench for the Champions League final. So I might never want to go back to Madrid with Liverpool again. But the acts of Diego Simeone, from the way he acted on the sidelines, how petulant he was, the ridiculous arguing with the fourth official after the red card, his unprofessional responses, and then taking off and not shaking Jurgen Klopp's hand to the point where Klopp was literally shaking ball boys' hands and physio's hands. And like, literally, you could see him. He was walking around like just shaking strangers' hands. Like, he would have shook the fans' hands. Like, because I think deep down he knew that was wrong and that was classless and that shouldn't have been done. And I think Simeone actually thought it was a mind game. Like, I'm not going to shake his hand because I got to go play him in 2 weeks at Anfield. And I think it's the worst thing they could have done. I think they set up themselves to get drugged at Anfield as long as we show up defensively solid. Because that looks like a weak team to me. As good as João Felix and Griezmann look together, that is a depleted Atletico team. La Liga is way down if that is one of the best teams in that league. And I honestly believe that they're in for a little bit of a beatdown. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little fun poked at Diego throughout the match by the Liverpool faithful.
And now they're not going to have Griezmann either on the away game, obviously, because of the red card and everything. So, yeah, it's funny you say that with the Keita and the Madrid trips, because that was actually what scared me. And I think I mentioned it in the fan chats on the Discord channel, that whenever I see a huge lineup change and, you know, us trying to get out of the box and do something tactical genius move like we did against Real Madrid, it usually kind of flops, which made me even more worried. But what a great game that was. So, Bickler, what is your take on the Madrid game? Obviously, it's huge 3 points and kind of like, I mean, pretty much seals the deal for the group. What do you make of the game overall?
I mean, I'm probably one of the few people that actually enjoys Atletico matches because it's like, I mean, Simeone's basically a Bond villain. He manages teams exactly how he played. He's a dirty little cheat. And I just think like his entire team plays that way. You know what you're in for. I don't know. Like, I find the consistency somewhat refreshing. Like, I don't think that he like I mean, I guess I'm a little bit of a dirtbag, so I appreciate the authenticity and just him embracing it, right? And like, I just hope nobody gets hurt on the second leg, because that's the one thing that worries me about them is they are not afraid to just go after knees if they need to. And at that point, they probably will. I thought the first half was the most quintessential 45 minutes of Naby. It's Naby rolled up into 45 minutes, scores a banger and gets torched for 2 goals. Like, that's just Naby. Like, and like, I kind of giggled because we won, but like, it is the most like Naby thing ever for that to happen. I thought the referee in that game had some serious stones, like to overturn and make that call. Like, so a hat tip to him, because like, he was not swayed by that crowd or that the Atletico intimidation when they were surrounding him and touching him. Like, he did a good job of just putting his foot in the ground and grabbing that game by the balls and like making the right call. So I was not expecting that. I was pleasantly surprised. I want to see more of that in football. You know, I mean, that's the way the game should be. Whether he made it out of Madrid alive is probably another issue, but like, I mean, yeah, there's loads to talk about in that match. It was a fun one for sure.
I understand when they play their pretty football and they used to do a little bit of their counter and they had tactical awareness. They don't look like that team anymore, though. They look like a confused team because they don't have the athletic players that they used to have and the speedsters. Like, they don't have the young Griezmann that could actually lead Atletico to something that looked like they could win something. So,
well, I mean, I would think of it as like a sophisticated Spaniard getting drunk in Burnley. I mean, that's what it looks like.
I was just going to say, though, don't we give them a little too much credit when we come on here and rip on Sean Dyche for setting his guys up to break ankles? And the only thing they do is they do it in warm weather in a nice climate in Madrid.
That's the least they can do, you know?
They're Burnley. Yep. They're Burnley, but they win a little. And part of the reason they win is because 75% of the league sucks and is shit.
Well, I think it's frustrating because, like, I mean, yeah, you can say what you want with the La Liga, but I think the frustrating thing about them is they have the quality to not play like that. Like, they have the quality to open up and beat people on sheer talent if they want to.
But I will say this, if there was a cameo, and for all the people out there that talk about whether or not we were really in on João Felix when he was up originally and whether we would be interested next year when he plans to leave Madrid, either this summer or next, he would be a perfect long-term replacement for Bobby Firmino because he does everything dropping back. He plays like a false nine. He creates goals. He scores goals. And you can see the class. I mean, Griezmann got the goals, but really it was Felix's movement and the interchange that they had. Let's be honest, that touch by Griezmann to take the ball away from Virgil and then sweep it past Alisson with one movement on the second goal was purely world class. And that must make the people at Barcelona just get sicker and sicker in their stomach than seeing Messi dressed up in his pretty little light blue outfit in Paris, sitting on the bench, not scoring goals there either. Because that wrapped up everything that Griezmann does well with his movement, his touch, and his finishing. And I think they saw exactly zero of that for $185 million that they paid for him at Barcelona. And I couldn't be happier to see all of them struggling for overspending. And for everybody in our chat group right now that's been clamoring about opening up the blank checkbook, just take a look at what Barcelona did for the last 10 years in creating an unbalanced wage structure and paying way too many people high wages and upsetting their own locker room. It's the reason that they put out a lineup that only had 4 senior players over the age of 25 to play in an El Clasico this weekend, and they were embarrassed on their home pitch. So I want to sign Mo to anything we can, but we have to keep it within structure of what is already, I think, the 5th or 6th largest wage bill in the world. So we've got to be in reason here when we throw out that we want to buy this stuff. We just have to.
I actually like that Burnley Atletico Madrid analogy because, I mean, they are definitely not as bad as Burnley, though. I'll give them that. I mean, they have that La Liga theatrics, people flopping around and things like that. I don't think it's as harsh as Burnley, but it's still ugly to watch, how they play. And I figured, like, okay, that's their style, kind of like you're saying, Bickler, is from, like, a reflection of the coach, which I understand. And that's how they play, really, since he's been there. But going back to it, I thought, in that game, it was the coach that was the asshole, if you will. Whereas against United, we saw like players kind of like acting out, if you will, kind of like throwing some tantrums. Do you get that more as, well, I guess they're United players, so it's kind of natural. But aside from that, is it was it just frustration? Or is it just frustration at their coach, or just because you're getting your head bashed in? And I mean, I've done it where you got to take it out on somebody.
I think the difference between those two is Simeone runs that show. And I don't think Ole has that dressing room, and I don't think he's had it for a long time. And you're sure as shit not going to have it when you acquire Ronaldo. That's now his team. So I think you have two teams. I mean, Ronaldo's kicking a fucking teenager on the ground, they're going to embody that persona. They're going to embody that. And I think you just have two different situations. I think you have a manager who runs the system and runs those players and has the respect because of what they've won. And I think you have another club that's trying to be great again that the manager doesn't have any sway whatsoever.
What do you think, Gally? I mean, like I say, I can see. I mean, Pogba looked like, I mean, when he got the red card, he just laughed it off and said, I don't even know if he needed a freaking shower, but at least he had the opportunity to take the shower earlier. I mean, he was only out there, like 15 minutes?
I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to shower for at least 72 hours after putting that much dye in your hair.
That's a good point.
And seriously, I'm so sick and tired of his hair. And I'm sick and tired of the fact that this world-class player who gets on the pitch for France and once looked like the best midfielder in the world. To be honest, Paul made the great comment about you sign Ronaldo and you lose the team. To be honest, Ole had no chance because really he had to take over what was the biggest mistake that they made, which was spending 90 million pounds on Paul Pogba. He's never lived up to any of the money. He's never lived up, to be totally honest, other than, a really good run in the World Cup. He's never lived up to any of his own billings as a player. He was never the best midfielder in Serie A. And, he played in a midfield with Pirlo. And, these guys doing all the hard work. And he was able to be creative and go forward. And now he's asked to do something. And then when he refuses to do it, they replace him with players who will. And his response is go on out there, help us get a hold of this midfield. Go on out there, get on the ball, show us your class. Just help change this, stem this, hold this to 4-0. And he gets sent off in 15 minutes. It's criminal. It's really criminal. And to be honest, they should have been down to 8 men. Ronaldo should have been sent off regardless of the fact that he caught the ball. VAR should have sent him off, but it didn't because it was Ronaldo. If that was Cavani, he's in the showers at 45 minutes plus 4. Fred could have been sent off for a tackle right after it. And Harry Maguire absolutely stopped a goal-scoring opportunity by taking Jota down on the box. All of that happened before Pogba goes asinine crazy and comes 2 feet over the ball and catches the player. And he's, we're saying we hope he's not that hurt. We're lucky he didn't catch his standing leg and that thing didn't snap. That was a really, really bad tackle. And I'd argue the worst performance yesterday was by Anthony Taylor for not knowing that was a red card in real time, for not looking at the monitor himself after he knew he was kicked, because the side official actually said he saw Ronaldo kick at, so he should have went and taken a look or at least looked into it. And he lost complete control during that little fracas. He just wanted to get to halftime like everybody else at United.
Yeah, it almost seemed like his version of the mercy rule is what it looked like. They were like, you guys are already kicking their ass, come on, kind of thing. And it was just like the rules went out the door.
I think what's interesting is we always hear that what the VAR official is saying is, hey, go have a look at it. And if you look at that, if you watch that game back and they show Anthony Taylor, he's got his finger to his ear because he's listening, and he says, oh, it's a red. So they straight up were like, it's a red card, dude. So he went over there. I thought that was kind of – Yeah. He didn't want to look. I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting because we're always under the impression that they're like, oh, we're not allowed to say, go look at it, but like he clearly moused to the mouthpiece, oh, it's a red. So they definitely were like, Atwell was just basically like, look, dude, it's a red.
Like, this one is pretty bad kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I am glad he went and looked at it himself. I am glad he went and looked at it himself, though, and I want them to do more of that, especially on the red cards and the penalty decisions. If I've made a call on the field and you want me to change it, I feel like the referee should go take a look and make that change for themselves, because then they own it. Then they're not waiting for Stuart Atwell or one of these idiots in a booth somewhere at Stockley Park to go, make the decision for them. If it's blatant and it was a dive and we don't need to waste the time, and you called it a pen, but it's just not even close, it was a dive, call it a dive, give them a yellow card and move on, wipe off the penalty or offsides, etc. But I do feel like in these judgment situations where a call was made on the field, they need the refs to go over there and do it more often, because it's the only thing that's going to make the refs realize it's still going to be on you to correct your mistake or to answer for it after the fact. And that's what I really like about what they're doing this year compared to last year when it comes to these VAR checks.
It's kind of hard to know. I guess if it was a close game or a tight game and stuff, we would probably dissect those calls a lot more here. But I don't even know if the calls would go that way if the game was tight. I just feel it was partially because, the game was over in everybody's minds. Really, once the fourth goal went in, but when we started the second half with the fifth goal, the game was pretty much over in everybody's minds, probably including Anthony Taylor and stuff. So Okay, real quick takes over here because I want three things to get to, and we're gonna have to wrap this up really fast over here. So one, Preston. Obviously, we're gonna be pretty tight, especially in midfield. We did not even talk about Milner's injury, but with him out, I would think at least to the international break. I didn't see it, but I heard it was a hamstring, so automatically you're talking like 3 to 4 weeks, based on like how bad the strain is and stuff like that. Preston game, kind of like a good chance to see the backups, Bickler's favorite Divock and stuff like that, right, Bickler?
But sure, just throw all the kids in. I mean, I don't care if Divock plays or not. Just throw the kids in. Get Gordon out there, Clarkson, Morton, get them all in there.
Yeah, in the back line, you're going to see the kids play too. I think if Nico's healthy, he plays along with Shmikas and probably Gomez and maybe even, as Paul likes to refer to him, as LFC America posters would tell us, Phillips, our second best center back going into the beginning of this season. Maybe he gets his long awaited, he gets to put the uniform back on again that he never thought he would wear. And I think if Kelleher's healthy, it was weird not having him on the bench for the United game, which I don't know what that was about. But I think it is a mix. I think you got to play a couple of the kids in the midfield, to Paul's point. I think you're going to have to play a few of them. Jones will probably get his start. I think Ox, Taki, and Divock will probably start up front, though I'd rather see Ox in the midfield and start Gordon on the wing and reward him for, what seems like a really good preseason and early part of training. So I would go a really young lineup, but I would have I hate to say this, I would have the hitters on the bench, because if it means bringing on Mane or Firmino or Jota to go bag a couple goals late in that match to secure moving to the next round, I'm all for it, because I want to be in this division I want to be in this competition as long as we can to keep giving these guys minutes, because I really believe we're going to need these guys in January and February to play meaningful minutes in the starting 11. And I just think now is the time to get them those minutes and the confidence.
Especially Mane with not getting a lot of minutes. And we didn't even get the chance to talk about that, but I kind of feel like he will be the first one coming in as one of the senior players tomorrow. So let's jump to the second topic I want to talk to, which is obviously next weekend against Brighton, especially in midfield. So 2 questions for you, Bickler. Who is partnering Van Dijk, and who is the trio in midfield? And I guess up front 3-2 for your lineup.
So
assuming Fab is healthy, let's go with that.
Right. So the center back pairing, man, I go Konate in this one. Brighton's a tall team. They're a big team. They put that 6'7" guy on the wing versus us last year and just absolutely destroyed us. They've got some size to them with Dunk, especially on set pieces. I'd go Konate there. Nothing against Matip. I think Matip has been our best playing defender on the year, but a Konate start makes sense to me in that spot. In the midfield, I think you got to go Fab, Hendo, and Jones. That's what I'm doing. I'm assuming Naby's not going to be back for probably a month. So that's what I'm doing, and I think the rest of the lineup sort of writes itself.
How about you, Gally?
I think Matip will get the start, because I don't see Klopp sitting him 3 games in a row, even though I didn't see him playing him 3 times in a week, twice in the season either. But I do think that, and this is what Klopp does, right? He gives someone their big spot start. Remember, he gave Robo the big start in October after not playing him at all for 2 months. And then he never got on the pitch again until after Thanksgiving. And we were like, but he finally got on the pitch. Why do I have to watch Alberto Moreno again? Why? And I think we might see Matip, and we won't be cursing it. I think in the midfield, we might see Ox. And I think Jones will probably get the shot first and foremost. But at some point, he's going to give Ox some run as well with this starting 11. And I do believe he's trying more than before to play a deeper squad, even though it's not a strength of his and not something he loves to do, because I genuinely believe he knows for them to compete on all levels and all fronts, he's going to need every player in this squad to play meaningful minutes, especially through those periods of January and February when we are going to be missing a few of the players when they go off to AFCON, or if we get any injuries. And, I think someone mentioned hopefully Thiago's fit. Fortunately for Brian, he won't be back till after the next international break. So, I think we're going to be playing with a 4-man midfield really until that next international break. And I think it could mean some minutes for some of these kids. I just think we're going to have to. Or it's going to mean Jota dropping back into midfield, which isn't the worst thing in the world. He did it for Wolves. He can do a job. He clearly works hard enough going back. But I just think it's going to be a big ask, but I do think guys are going to have to step up.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm more intrigued to see, because I do see Jones actually for the third person in midfield, but who is going to be Van Dijk's partner going into next weekend? And he did play great, and coming off of obviously that's a huge confidence builder, because you are going against, it wasn't just, he did great at a home game against Watford or something like that. I mean, this was meant to be, on paper, a tough game. What a joyous goddamn Sunday. I mean, we ran a lot longer than our regular podcast, but I mean, heck, we could talk about that game for 3-4 hours, and I can still find more stuff to talk about and enjoy, because this will last me months with my brother, I can tell you that. But what will also last months could be Kelly's lead in fantasy football.
Hell yeah.
Personally, do not care much about fantasy football, even though Bickler had a huge week. I had a really shitty week till Mo showed up. I just captained Mo and then just lead the way so I can survive. I didn't even have to page down this week to see where Bickler's at. So our main
because I'm 4 points behind you, buddy.
4 points is a lot in fantasy, is what I was told.
You haven't. I just want you to know that you haven't had a better week than me in 4 weeks now. Just want you to know that.
You know what's concerning about that is that you're constantly checking my score, because that's worries me. But my only goal is really to beat Bickler anyway. Doesn't matter what I rank up. I could be 104th. If Bickler's 105th, I'm happy. And the second thing I really want to see is Kelly, and I don't even care if she wins this thing, which would be awesome, but overtaking our resident fantasy expert, which I guess should be Kelly now. So I don't know if you can give us her email address, but we do need an expert to talk fantasy on American Scouser at times. But I was looking at, she had 116 points, and that's like the most I see over here. And she is now 4th with 633 points. And hold on, let me scroll down to you real quick, Gally.
It's good to see that our lunchtime Zoom calls are really paying off. Kelly and I get together on Thursdays.
At a measly 602 points.
Yeah,
and like I say, from what I know, 4 points is a lot. So I know for a fact 29. 4 is probably nothing, obviously. I'm just kidding. But 29 is pretty steep there, buddy.
No,
so are you ever going to come back from this? Or we were going to do like a wellness check?
She made a power move. I'll give her credit. I helped her a little bit with it after last week when I refused to help her. That was my anniversary present to her. I told her she got too close and she could do it herself.
You're such a romantic.
She didn't cook. She didn't even cook, help me with dinner, or clean anything for a week. And I basically realized I should probably help her with fantasy. I should probably actually thank the lucky stars that I have a life partner that watches football with me every single week, allows me to do all this crazy ass shit, and put as much effort into fantasy football as I do. The only reason she's good at it is she had to listen to me argue about it and talk about it and get pissed off about it happening. But yeah, proud of her. She made a boss wild card move, moved all the way up in 1 week. And I think she's top 50,000 overall in the entire game right now, which is pretty unbelievable when there's 8.4 million people playing. So she's pretty pumped. And, she's just riding the Mo train like all the good fantasy players out there. It's amazing what happens when the best player in the world makes you look better and better every week.
Yeah, she's in the league, and as humble.
I can't wait till next year when Gally pretends like he can't figure out why the Wi-Fi is not working.
Yeah, pretty much. It's gonna happen.
As humble as it is that you're taking credit for her success, how the hell are you going to make up these 31 points? Is my question.
You know what it won't be? It won't be giving recommendations to Matus in our Discord channel and then going ahead and doing the opposite. Then Matus yells at me like, hey, I kept Jota because you said to keep him because he'd start this week and that would be smart. And then I take a -4 to move Jota out, bring in Havertz, move Lukaku out and bring in Vardy. Yeah, that didn't work so well.
The hilarious thing about that is that Matusha loves Havertz. Loves Havertz.
I think, honestly, if all to our listeners here, if you are into fantasy football, definitely join our fan chat on Discord. We have a special channel just for fantasy football. And as I was reading you, Mateusz, and Ben, who's actually listening to us right now, talk about fantasy football, I was like, I don't belong here. Yep. I was looking for Bickler on the other corner of the room so we can just sneak out the back door and be
we're just gonna let the nerds hang out in here.
They were like talking about phrases and numbers that was very foreign to me. I was like, yeah, I shouldn't even be here.
It clearly, with 8.4 million people playing the game out there across the world, it's kind of a big topic. Actually, Liverpool has the largest supporters group, over 400,000, I believe, Liverpool supporters playing this thing. So might not be the worst thing for us to include little segments or even get some more folks and some posts about it in our fan chat and Discord. If you have ideas for it, feel free to share them with us. And who knows, maybe one day we'll even do a
The thing is, we're going to need somebody who knows what they're talking about. So is Kelly going to be able to join us?
Well, I was going to say, I got an idea. We might be able to get the person to lead the charge. Ben did send me a private message and was like, just checking to see if Kelly's going to be around for my lineup review this week. I'm not sure I need to send anything to you anymore. So, my wife is out there ready to give you your fantasy help. And, I just need Paul's therapist number and we'll all be good.
Speaking of Paul's therapist number, I know we're way over time, but this is what I live for. I only do this podcast so I can get somebody to rant on it. Paul, tell us how you feel about the fantasy football lineups and how you cannot change your lineup with the players. You have approximately like a minute to just go apeshit. So go ahead.
I got in trouble last time we did this because I just said it was essentially the most British thing I've ever seen to take somebody else's idea and then make it shitty. Like that's what I don't understand about it. Like every other fantasy sport in the world, the players don't lock until like kickoff. Like that's when the players lock. My problem with like fantasy EPL is it doesn't matter how good your team is if you don't guess the fucking lineup right. It's almost like it's not even fantasy football. It's a lineup predictor game. And like, that's what drives me crazy. Like I shouldn't be penalized because some manager doesn't know how to rotate his players, Klopp, or some manager how can you possibly own a City player when they rotate every 2.5 days? Like it's just like crazy to me. Like, I don't get it. Like, and I guess that's part of the charm of it. And part of what the diehards really love about it is that you got to keep up and guess on rotation. And to me, that's the part that makes me want to throw my computer into the ocean.
Yeah, I know about the charm of it. The only charm of it is watching Kelly beat Galley's numbers. That's about the only charm I have left in this game now.
Very charming. It's about as charming as a 2 foot. It's about as charming as a 2 foot tackle. And if I could lay one in on Simeone right now, I would.
We'll have the chance
really gone off the
2
whales.
weeks. Well, gentlemen, we went way over our regular time, but there was a lot to talk about, and probably could have gone another hour or two. But thank you for joining me, and thanks to all those commenting and joining us. Definitely join our Discord channel because we're doing a lot of chat and smack talk over there too, and some really high-tech fantasy football talk. If you're really into it, I would definitely recommend it. We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, we'll talk about 2 more wins. None of them will be as glorious as the one that we had yesterday, but we'll take him either way. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you guys next week.